Hi everyone, it's Davey from EndlesslyHeSaid. So today's video is a little bit different. I was inspired by Myke C-Town and he made a video called 15 Albums That Changed My Life. And that's what this video is about. So let's get right into it. These are 15 records. They're not necessarily my favourite records, but they all came along at a different time in my life and they did change and make who I am today. So the first record I wanted to talk about is AFI, The Art of Drowning. I've showed this record before and you can watch that video just up here. The Art of Drowning came out in the year 2000 and I remember picking up this record on cassette tape from my friend and I copied up from the CD. That's what we used to do 17 years ago, and it just changed the way that I thought about music. It had me thinking about punk rock in a very different way. For me, punk rock was always about this anarchy and this rebellion, but AFI made music that was emotional and it was darker and it was very real. So Art of Drowning really started to pave my love for AFI, and it opened up doors for me when I was starting to listen to records by The Cure and Joy Division and more electronic stuff. And yeah, it just changed the way that I thought about music. The next record that changed my life is Rancid 5. I remember getting this CD. I had a copy of Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP and yeah, I swapped it for this with a friend. And this turned me on to hardcore punk. This is a hardcore record and sadly I don't have it on vinyl so I can't show you that just yet, but it really changed the way that I thought about punk rock like AFI did, but it made it faster, it made it more aggressive, and it made me think, hold up, there is a whole world of music when I'm around this age of 16 that I'm missing out. It made me think about hardcore in a way that I hadn't before. Johnny Cash, American Recordings, number 4, The Man Comes Around. That's my next record that changed my life. This is full of covers. It covers Nine Inch Nails' Hurt, there's really emotional songs like A Bridge Over Troubled Water, but the actual title track of this, The Man Comes Around, it blew my mind. I'm a Christian and it made me think about the gospel and revelation in a very new way. At that time I hadn't really been into country music, I hadn't been really into any music that wasn't just pop or punk rock, and this made me think about country music in a really positive light. I know for a lot of people that are into alternative music, country music's their least favourite genre, but for me, it made it very real. So Johnny Cash turned me on to everything. And this is an amazing record. So if you haven't got this, you must listen to it. So while I was getting into punk rock, music was really diverse. And I remember one of the first shows I went to go see, I was maybe 13, and it was a ska punk show. But the band that made me turn on to ska punk and brought me into a lot of punk was this. This is Less Than Jake, Hello Rockview, Losing Streak. And in the UK, they put this out on a double CD, Losing Streak there, and Hello Rockview there. And Less Than Jake are kind of one of those fun bands. I talked about them recently in one of my record videos when I went over the vinyl that I owned by them. They make punk rock fun and they make it accessible, and it's okay that you can listen to music that's about like fart jokes and girls and getting stoned, I guess. But it's fun, and I remember listening to this on repeat time and time again. I had a cassette tape again of this and it was like recorded each record on one side, and so I'd play that all the time at home. The 4 record that changed my life is this, Hello Rockview. I spoke about the next record I'm going to talk about quite recently, and I actually got to see the band play it in full. That record is They're Only Chasing Safety by Underoath. I was showing the vinyl record in this video up here, so you can go back and watch that and see my experiences of seeing them play it live. Sometimes I keep things in records or like receipts or little clippings or flyers, and I did exactly this, and this is a clipping. I'll make a close-up so you can see what this is. At the time that I went to go see Underoath and I got the CD signed. So I just moved to Coventry in 2004 and I went to this youth service at Holy Trinity Church in the city centre. I ran into someone called Dave and he was wearing an Underoath shirt, and I was talking about how I love Christian music and I loved punk rock, and he was like, oh, this is a really cool band called Underoath. They're a bit more metal, they've got lots of screaming in their music, which for me at the time I was like, oh, that sounds radically different to what I'm into. That summer it really sparked my interest, and it took me to a Christian conference called New Wine, and I got to see bands like Death Is Not Welcome Here and see some other heavier bands, and it pricked my interest so much that it started me wanting to listen to Christian heavy music, and so I did. I got to see Underoath later that year with the little clip that I showed you earlier, and it took me down a path that I've never turned back from. So being a Christian can be a little bit daunting. I know it's not for everyone, and there are people that listen to Underoath that aren't Christian, and that's okay. The next record I'm going to talk about is vastly left field, but I need to include this because it was the first album that I ever owned. I don't have it anymore, at least I don't have it near me, and that album is this: Spice Girls, Spice World. I got this record when I was 10 years old, and growing up in a house that wasn't really about music, I was just deeply invested in what was on TV, what was in magazines, and pop music was it for me. And this is something that really just turned me on to wanting to listen to music. It made me want to listen to music, and having just one cassette tape made me want to go and buy more cassette tapes, and made me want to go and buy some CDs when cassette tapes were dying a death. And I think we all had that first record, and I'm sure many people can say it was something a lot cooler than Spice World, but that was it for me. It turned me on to music, and I mean, those songs are still bangers. Number 7, the next record that I want to talk about that changed my life is a new record. This came out in 2015. That record is Integrity by Jamie. I'd listened to hip hop, I'd listened to rap, I'd listened to some grime in the past, but never heard an artist really lined up with what I was thinking about and what I believed in. And Jamie is a vegan talking about veganism in grime, and then talking about stepping away from the crowd and dropping off cigarettes and dropping off weed and only drinking lemonade and on ice in a rave. And for me, that made grime come to the forefront for me. I wanted to get into this music for such a long time, but it seemed a little bit abstract. Like, we've listened to garage and we've listened to dubstep and to grime and music that was associated with that scene for a little while. So Jamie turned me on to Boy Better Know, and he turned me on to everyone that was associated with that, and listening to all the different features on there made me really switch onto those artists. And it's like reading the thanks list on those records that you have as a child or as a youth, and thinking, oh, they're into them and they're friends with them, and let's find out about them. And that's what this record did. I really want this on vinyl, and I'm aware that there's like limited to 100 or 200 copies or something on gold vinyl, but maybe one day. So a couple years after I discovered Underoath, and in 2006, I had a really good summer. Like, I was making music with that band that I spoke about, and I got to see probably one of the most intense and one of my favourite bands of all time. And the record that I'm going to associate with that is this. The record I'm going to associate with that is this. This is the Chariot, Everything Is Alive, Everything Is Breathing, Nothing Is Dead and Nothing Is Bleeding. Just have it on CD, it's not out on vinyl. This record changed the genre for me. There was this like post-hardcore screamo genre that I'd so deeply associated with Christian music, and that was what was being played out. But the chaos that came with this music that isn't anything strictly original, but it is something that was radically different. Now, I'd listened to Norma Jean at this point, and I was aware who Josh Skogan was, but when the Chariot came out, it was sheer chaos. It was chaos that was hardcore, it was punk, it was something else. There was metal in there as well, and I wasn't a stranger to any of those genres, but watching that band live, I first saw them in 2006, and I saw them at the Canal Club in Wolverhampton with a band called Becoming the Archetype. There's probably like 30 people there, but I remember going absolutely bonkers and then sitting down and getting to talk to Josh Skogan and a couple of the other members of the band in an interview that made up one of the first features for the zine that I made. It was radical, like it was very different to sit down and talk to people from America, from Atlanta, and hear what they had to say about music and really engage and invest with them. This is a classic album for me. It's now like 12 years old. I have a Chariot tattoo just up here as well. Next record I'm going to talk about is the first one I'm actually showing on vinyl for this, but this is The Cure Concert Live. Here's the front cover. Here is the back cover. A black dust sheet and black vinyl. Now this came out in 1984, and a lot of you might be thinking, okay, this came out before you were born, Davey, like what are you chatting about? But this is a record that my first ever girlfriend at the time had on CD and we'd listen to all the time. And I mentioned earlier at the top of the video, if it wasn't for AFI then I wouldn't be listening to The Cure. And I definitely wanted to, but it was her that turned me on to The Cure because I liked AFI. And this was the record that was played all the time. It's got really old songs like Shake Dock Shake and Charlotte Sometimes, and it is classic Cure. It's really, really good, but The Cure really made me think about music in a way that I wouldn't ever, and think about life as well. Their music is so deeply layered and so sophisticated, and I'm eternally grateful that I'm a big Cure fan and I've got to see them a couple of times, but yeah, this was the first record that I got into. This is another record that's just on CD for me, and it's only out on CD. This is Seventh Star, Brood of Vipers. I got to see Seventh Star on this tour, and they were touring with Taking Names. I think it was 2005, but I remember when I was just starting to be in that band. This band's called Redemption Awaits. You can maybe find us on YouTube. The guitarist of that band, Nate, was saying, oh, this band's Seventh Star playing, they're really heavy hardcore, they're on Face Down Records. And it was the first time I was hearing about Face Down Records outside of like Comeback Kid, and it was intense. Like watching a band like Seventh Star from Florida who make this like kind of macho jock, heavy, hardcore, going to the gym, pushing weights and playing guitars, music was intense, but it was really fun. And they're a band that's from the same town as A Day to Remember, and they had A Day to Remember like open their record release show for this album way back when. But Seventh Star just make me love music. They make me love hardcore, and that was a really intense show. I later got to see them again and again, but Brood of Vipers, man, this is just kingdom living with such heavy hardcore backing it. So by now you probably understood I've got fairly reasonable goth tendencies. The next record I'm going to talk about is exactly that. This is Nine Inch Nails' The Fragile. Again, I just have this on CD. It is out on vinyl. It's fairly expensive to get. I remember when I first moved to this city, I was 18 years old, and this record helped me get through some really dark times. And I don't think that I'd be who I was without understanding like how to cope with depression and how to cope with those kind of mental health issues that you go through when you're a young person. And not that everybody does, I understand that, but for me that was a thing, that was a reality when I was 18, and coming out the other side of that and understanding that music can be a support for that, it can really help, was radical. For some reason I can't find the next record I'm going to talk about. It was one of the first records I ever got, and it was Green Day Nimrod, and it was the year after I got Spice World as a record, so this was a big change. This is the record, along with The Offspring's Americana, that introduced me to punk rock. It made music fun, it made it a little bit dirty, it made it jokey, but it made it very like relevant for me. And I remember seeing Green Day in the year 2000, like a few years after getting this, and it being like such a fun time. And it just takes me back to my youth, like being a teenager and watching bands like Green Day and The Offspring and Cat Down and Sponge and just being a kid again. And so Green Day Nimrod was the one that really sort of started that journey for me. The next record I'm going to talk about I've shown in one of my other record videos. I'll link that here, but it's Sigur Ros Untitled. Sigur Ros were a band that I got switched onto from the AFI forums again. I seem to find everything from there at this point. But they made post-rock, and I was never really into that genre of music before Sigur Ros. And this album in particular, I remember I just used to fall asleep to it. And it was about the time I was discovering Nine Inch Nails that I mentioned before, and other artists that didn't quite make the cut, but bands like VNV Nation helped me understand life a little bit more. They continue to make really epic music, and I'm really grateful I got to see them before. I'm really hoping I get to see Sigur Rós at the end of this year too, because they're one of the best live shows. The next record I'm going to talk about is this. This is Gather Beyond the Ruins. The back cover, it comes with a lyric sheet like this. Reverse of that here. Black splatter on green. This is obviously out on Catalyst Records. For those of you that are curious about getting this record, I know that Catalyst Records have just launched their new web store and they are putting out new releases again. So you must go and check that out. I will link that below so you can go find it. There's someone handing me a flyer to this show. They were touring with To Kill and they were playing in Birmingham, and I completely messed up and I didn't go because it was a school night or something and I didn't know anyone. And I just seen someone handed me a flyer at the Black Dahlia murder and I thought, oh, okay, this looks different. I was vegan already at the time, and the second show I put on was with an artist called True Nature. True Nature is Keegan Kuhn, who has been a massive part of the animal rights movement, but mostly more recently outside of music and the filmmaking thing. So he's a big part of the production that's made Cowspiracy and made What the Health. What the Health I just recently watched, and for the purposes of this video, and if you've got to the end of it and you care about animals, then I'm going to link that below so you can watch it for free on YouTube. But he was a big part of that. So I got to host him playing acoustic guitar and playing Gather songs, and he brought with him this library of information that was just so relevant, and it made not seeing Gather okay because I took home so many zines. It made me think about, one of them was Anarchy and Alcohol, and it made me just really think about radical living in a very different way. And I think if it wasn't for Gather, if it wasn't for Keegan and True Nature, it wasn't for bands like Seven Generations, that vegan straight edge mentality, that Catalyst Records mentality wouldn't be very real for me. So the last record of the 15 that changed my life is this. This is the Dresden Dolls, Yes Virginia. I actually got my copy signed by Amanda and Brian. I was part of the Dresden Dolls street team, I was part of the Roadrunner Records street team. Roadrunner Records are an interesting label, that's maybe a topic for another discussion. But I was handing out flyers for this record, I got to meet the band, and I got to see them live. This came out in 2006, and again it's at that time that I was just starting to go to shows, starting to get really involved in music, started promoting shows, and if it wasn't for Dresden Dolls leading in and on from Nine Inch Nails, Johnny Cash, AFI, that kind of darker style of music, then I don't think I'd have got the idea of DIY quite right. Amanda Palmer is an amazing artist in her own right, and Brian Viglione too. Like, he plays with some great bands now. But Amanda had this incredible TED talk about the art of asking, which I'll link again below in the show notes so you can see what's going on with that. I would sincerely recommend everyone watches that. Like, just take 15 minutes out of your day and make time to watch that TED talk. Dresden Dolls for me taught me that anyone could make music. At a time when my band was starting to wind down and I wasn't really doing it, it made me really think radically about what I could do. It made me want to think about making zines more, putting on more shows, and just playing out and living out your passion. So while I wasn't going to play cabaret punk because that's not my background, I did want to play some kind of music, and the Dresden Dolls helped me realise that. This is a great record for anyone that does, like, even if you're watching this and you're into stuff like Panic at the Disco, they did stuff with them way back when, and if you're into punk rock stuff or piano based stuff, you'll love this record. So that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching this slightly different video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share it with your friends. If you really loved it, just smash that like button, give it a big thumbs up, and leave a comment below if any of these records really resonate with you, or if you've made a video about your top 15 or 15 records that have changed your life. Shout out to Myke C-Town for inspiring me to make this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. The button's just below in the show description, and also you can just click that little bell and it tells you when videos are coming out. I'll see you guys next time for another video.